Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Dwight Kay is a second-term member of the Illinois House of Representatives. He represents the people of District 112. His district includes most of Edwardsville, Glen Carbon, Collinsville, Caseyville, and small sections of Granite City and Fairview Heights. During this half hour, Representative Kay and I will be discussing the current status of the Illinois government pension reform, why Illinois businesses are leaving the state, why Illinois has been spending money it doesn't have, and finally, can the state recover financially? Dwight Kay, welcome to Conversation.
It's good to be back.
You were with us not that many weeks ago, and just so everybody knows, today's date is April 23rd, even though this is being shown sometime in May.
Correct.
So there may be things that have changed between April 23rd and May, whatever it is that shows up. When we left this, we were talking about the financial condition of the state of Illinois. So let's just carry on with that discussion as to the state of the state of the state. Now, the governor, he actually makes a speech about that, doesn't he?
He does.
And what was his assessment of the state last time that he made that speech?
Well, Governor Quinn actually gave a very upbeat, positive view of the state of Illinois, and essentially indicated that we were working our way out of the financial mess that we have essentially built up over at least the last 10 years, but really it goes back further than that. But he gave an upbeat speech, which most of us, in terms of substance, thought it was not such a good speech.
Well, do the numbers add up? Well, or did he have numbers to offer first? And if he did the numbers add up to progressively moving towards financial solvency?
Well, he didn't have numbers. He talked in broad generalities, and the numbers don't add up. If you sit down and, again, being a businessman and also an elected official has a benefit, and that is you can do the math, you can do the homework that you need to be a little more effective, and the numbers don't add up. And I'll just give you a couple of generalities.
Yes, give me some numbers and what you mean by they don't add up.
Well, here's a number that doesn't add up. If your budget has been balanced for the last 10 years, which we claim it has been, then why do we have $9 billion worth of unpaid bills? By the way, we no longer talk about old bills. We talk about old bills and we talk about new old bills. And it sounds...
When you say that things haven't been paid, explain what you're actually saying.
Well, what I'm saying is that people who are under contract or doing work for the state of Illinois.
So there are people right around in your district that are doing, they're providing services, they're selling the state certain real goods, like selling them groceries.
Exactly.
Right? And then they expect to be paid, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so now explain from there. They just sold them something, now what?
Well, then they submit a voucher, and that voucher may be approved, and when it is approved, once they determine it's accurate and correct, it's then supposed to be put in a queue to be paid.
Right.
Well, as opposed to being put in the queue because we have no money, that voucher sits. And it sits for a long time. We have some unpaid bills now that are 2.5 years. And when I mentioned...
Say that again. How long?
Well, they're outstanding.
No, what was this one? 2.5 years?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
So I can only imagine that somebody that maybe is waiting for a paycheck and, they expect it on Friday, but it's not going to be there on Friday. It's going to be there 2.5 years from now?
Well, 2.5.
Yeah, okay.
And we actually worked it down so that it was more like 2 years and approaching maybe a year and 9 months, and now we're in a reverse direction, which is bad. And it's not a funny matter. It's a serious matter when you start talking about two categories of bills: old bills and new old bills.
Okay, so keep going with numbers.
Well, that's one. Certainly, if you want to talk...
$9 billion.
$9 billion and
of
climbing.
People in the state who have performed services
Correct.
Or sold stuff to the state, and they're still waiting for their money.
That is correct.
Okay.
And again, talking about balanced budgets. Well, let's take the pension fund in the state of Illinois.
Yes.
we have done a number of things to the state pension as state government. One of the largest things we did was we failed to make payments for 2 years. We took a 2-year holiday. And then after that, we borrowed money to fund the pension system. And of course, when you borrow, you have interest.
Costs.
You have a burden there. You have an interest burden or a carry. So we did that.
Plus, you also didn't collect interest during the 2 years when you weren't putting the money in.
Well, that's exactly right. That's
okay.
So today, as you and I sit here and talk, we know that we're losing every day because our pensions are not being funded correctly. Although we're making payments, we still have an unfunded liability for past indiscretions. Every day we go by here, we have an unfunded liability of $12.7 million.
Every day.
Every day.
Whose pensions are these that we're talking about?
Well, it's spread out over the 5 pension systems in Illinois, but predominantly we're talking the big ones. We're talking about state workers, we're talking about state university workers, and we're talking about teachers.
So all these people who are currently working or are currently retired.
Correct.
Okay, so that's that. So the money that they're expecting to live off of is in jeopardy?
I think so. And let me just pull back a minute. So now we have $9 billion of unpaid bills. We have at least $100 billion in unfunded pension liability. And people who say that's not a real number are mistaken.
Who's saying it's not a real number?
Well, you will hear from time to time those who don't want to really get into an honest discussion of what's happened to the pension system and why it's unfunded or underfunded will often give many excuses, and that's pretty commonplace in Springfield to try and cover up the truth with overstatement or innuendo. So there are many people who do that. Some legislators do it. But you will hear TRS oftentimes make pronouncements like that, not always. And you will often hear people who are in the system themselves, whether it's one of the 5 state pension plans, will say that's simply not true, that there are not losses like that. So I happen to believe it's true because I've run the numbers, so there's a difference here between fact and fiction.
So you got $9 billion past due bills, $100 billion in underfunding for pensions, which people are expecting to live off of in their retirement. And anything else?
Well, I think the fact that we routinely, after we pass what we call balanced budgets, come back and have to pass supplemental appropriations bills. And just a recent example, during the lame duck session, we had to pass another appropriations bill to supplement the spending that was predicted in the General Assembly last year because we overspent and we had to come back and fill the gap with some revenues in January. So that's not balanced. That means we've overspent the revenues that we're taking in, so we're going to take cash flow from today and pay for those obligations that were not appropriated or not anticipated, so to speak. Just last Wednesday, we passed another line item supplement to keep nursing homes in Illinois who take care of the elderly and those who are disadvantaged. We passed a supplemental to pay their bills because we knew that if we didn't, those facilities would shut down and we would have thousands of people in Illinois that would not receive care. That's not good budgeting. So when we talk about balancing a budget, I think you need to be careful and understand that what we think is balanced and what is truly in check, transactionally speaking, is not quite the same.
Now, you're a businessman, so you know something about budgeting.
I do.
If you ran your company in this way, what would happen to your company?
Well, first of all, I would be out of a job. And secondly, the company would be put in jeopardy, and that would be the employees as well as the assets of ownership. So Illinois is a big business. It's no different than any other business. We're just serving a different clientele, and that's the taxpayers and then those people who look for opportunity or maybe more so security from the state, people who can't take care of themselves.
Okay. So in Illinois, the fundamental law is the Illinois Constitution. What does the Illinois Constitution require you to spend money on, and then what are the other things that money is being spent on?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a couple of things that the Constitution says that we have to do. By the way, the Constitution, and I might just divert for just a minute, the Constitution says that we're not supposed to have liabilities, borrowed money, for things like pensions for over 1 year.
It says that in there.
It says that
in the Illinois Constitution.
In the Illinois Constitution.
Okay.
So we have violated that piece of the Constitution. I forgot whether it's Section 8 or Section 9, but you can go in there and read it. It's very clear, very easy to understand. So
where's the courts in all this?
Well, that's a
if
good
you're violating the law, I thought courts normally were supposed to deal with stuff like that.
Well, it would require somebody to ask for the court to opine, to weigh in and make a judgment. That certainly hasn't been done.
So all it takes is one taxpayer to ask that question.
Probably.
Right. Sure, there's somebody out there that might want to know the answer to that
Well,
question.
I think it would be an interesting, let me put it this way, as a non-lawyer, I think it would make a very interesting question, but that's to be seen.
Okay, so what things must the state spend money on, and what other things is the state spending money on?
Well, there are three things. Constitutionally, we have a pension that we put in place following CONCON in 1970. There was a fundamental basis for how the pension system would be set up. It was a defined program that said the state would contribute, and then at some point in time, one of the participants in one of the programs would be paid, or all the participants. I should correct that and say all the participants in the program would be paid. So we have a pension obligation. The second thing is we have obligations to our schools. And unfortunately, last year we shorted schools $210 million. This year it's going to be somewhere between $410 and $430 million. And the court,
whoa. Try this again. Last year was 200 and something, now it's
210.
210.
Correct.
And now they're going to spend 400 and something on schools.
They're not going to spend it. They're
not.
not going to give it to schools.
I see.
Which affects your...
Oh, so they're shorting. Last time
That's
it was
correct.
200 short.
That's correct.
Now we're talking 400 short.
And that's, Lee, that's general state aid.
Right.
That's your general state aid. So instead of getting $6,000 per pupil, it depends on the various districts in the state. Everyone is going to be getting something less, and in some cases, substantially less.
So the superintendents of the various school districts in your area, like the Edwardsville system, the Collinsville system, they're suddenly going to wind up getting less money from the state that they're expecting. So either property taxpayers are going to have to make it up, or programs have to be cut.
And you've seen that. The answer is yes to that, and you've seen it in Cahokia, where just within the past week, they have, because of funding shortages from the state of Illinois to the district in Cahokia, they have cut out all programs. And I'm talking about football and baseball and athletic programs, and they've also cut out programs that are non-athletic. The bottom line is they're trying to keep their doors open and
actually teach something.
And actually teach. But the sad thing about it is, and I don't know whether the number was 27 or 34, they've also had to lay off more teachers. That makes the job of teaching effectively eminently more difficult.
You're talking about larger numbers of students in each class.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, there was you reference going back to the taxpayers. If you watched what happened in the O'Fallon School District, the O'Fallon residents resoundingly rejected a tax increase. They also fired their school board. I think they removed all the existing members of their school board and voted in a different board.
I see. Now, let's just slide over just a little bit. Taxes are, all right, let me say this better. Wealth is actually created in the state of Illinois by business, right? And then people get their jobs from these businesses that are creating wealth, and they get paid their salaries and wages out of the wealth that's being created by the businesses. But I've noticed that Illinois is losing some businesses. and therefore there's not as much wealth in the state of Illinois, which might be a reason why there isn't enough money to go around to the school districts. What would you suppose might be some of the reasons why businesses are either giving up business or moving out of the state of Illinois?
Well, I don't know the exact number of the companies that have left, but you're right. We know as a practical matter that, and this comes from reports in DCO and other agencies in the state of Illinois, that we've lost many, many businesses. And I'm talking about large, medium-sized, and some large companies. When you lose companies, you lose jobs. And those are the people who really keep the revenues flowing. I heard a comment yesterday made by one of my counterparts that the money we depend on the most comes from corporate Illinois. Mm-hmm. That's not true. No? That's simply not the case. It comes from taxpayers, individual taxpayers, and property taxes. Then you add in those who have jobs that go out and buy things. So there's three components. Sales tax. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So to say that, well, we rely on big business to carry the load is not a correct statement.
My point was not that they carry the load. They're the ones that create the wealth in the state of Illinois, from which everybody either derives a salary, a wage, and if you're not creating wealth, then there is no paycheck to be handed out.
Well, and what you're right on that account. What we saw in February was a huge job loss in the state of Illinois. We now have almost 18,000 more people who are unemployed. Mm-hmm. Illinois now has the second largest unemployment rate in the nation, only behind Nevada. Mm-hmm. That's something that is very troubling to me, for the very reason you stated. That's wealth going somewhere else.
And we also have the problem of businesses, some from Illinois, some from the rest of the country, who are actually going and moving their operations to other countries.
That's correct.
So that's tax money completely out of the American system.
Exactly.
And that's jobs that aren't going to any Americans. And why would you suppose that some businesses are leaving the United States for other countries?
Well, I can only give you my opinion. I think people like Caterpillar would give you maybe somewhat of a different answer, but here's what I will tell you. First of all, there are people who really want to go to work in countries like India, which, by the way, is the second or third largest economy in terms of growth mm-hmm. in the world. Mm-hmm. Granted, they have a lot of people, but they also have a lot of industry, mm-hmm. and they're growing rapidly. They've
got 1 billion people there.
They've got 1 billion people there, and so India is finding ways to create jobs, and one of the ways they do it is to make it a little more favorable in India to have American and English and other countries' businesses come to their country, because they know that they have to have a growth rate to sustain the wealth, if you will, to sustain their population, to pay the bills that they create. Mm-hmm. So they have very thoughtfully made an environment in India very conducive for American companies and companies of other nations to go to India.
Mm-hmm. Is the Illinois government thinking in those terms?
No.
What's the difference?
Well, that's, again, my opinion. We are more interested in electing people to seats in the House and the Senate than we are doing what's right for the people of the state of Illinois. We have had every opportunity this legislative session, and I'm talking about the last 3 months, to do things that would encourage business to come to Illinois. And all of those initiatives are in rules. And the ones that got out of rules went to subcommittee, never got...
When you say rules, you're talking about the Rules Committee.
The Rules Committee in the House.
This is where bills go before they actually go to the committee that they're going to be discussed in.
Yeah, that's kind of where it's vetted before it's allowed out to a committee. So there are many, many bills sitting out there that would be, and I don't use the word business friendly, I would just say it would create an environment that would be comparable to the states around us and the states around those states. They've already taken that initiative, but Illinois has not.
Have you spoken to the chairman of Rules?
No, I haven't, but I have talked to the chairman of various economic and business development committees, and this very next week I have partnered with a Chicago Democrat to hold subject matter hearings on some of the things that need to be done to keep Illinois' doors open to business.
Well, it sounds like you guys need businesses to stay, more business to come, more taxes to be generated so that you can pay $9 billion in past due bills.
That and many other reasons.
And to get these pensions. It seems to me if we took a longer term look, almost like taking a mortgage out. You say there's $100 billion in underfunding. Okay, so you set up a mortgage, a 20-year or mortgage to get that money in there, right? In addition to the regular monies that are going in there, create a separate fund or a separate tax or something that's specifically designed to collect money that's going only one place and can only go and can't be spent on any other things.
Well, it's an interesting concept, but we have bled the state down so far that there is no way to create a fund because a special fund, as you put it, because there's no revenue to put into a special fund.
Well, that's why I use, and I don't like the idea, but that's why I use the word tax to create, you know, another point on the sales tax or something. I mean, it's got to be a tax that's generating huge amounts of money, because if you're going to do this over 10 or 20 years, you're going to need to collect, you know, billions of dollars per year, just to catch up. But what is the current budget of the state of Illinois? How many billion a year?
Well, we're somewhere between 33 and 33.5. Projected revenues for this next year are about 35.7.
So you really need to take on somewhere you have to find another, say, $5 billion a year that's dedicated if you're going to catch up these pension funds in some reasonable amount of time.
Well, here's two problems with your thesis or your thought here on how to create a different fund. First of all, we've created funds in the past, and those funds have been swept. They've been used for political purposes by governors, Republican and Democrat, for their own benefit.
I'm just saying,
that's wrong.
If you create a fund whose only purpose is to go in and start filling up that hole in the pension funding right now, and it may not by law be used for anything except to go into that particular cookie jar, is that not possible, or are people simply not to be trusted in government any longer?
Personally, well, there are some people you can trust on both sides of the aisle, but I would also say there's some people you can't trust on both sides of the aisle. And that's a sad thing to say, because let's face it, we're elected, I'm elected as well as my colleagues to go and hopefully do the right thing. I was asked the other day, just as an example, don't you fight for your district? And I said, I do fight for my district, but I also now am finding that I have to fight to keep Illinois viable, because otherwise my district doesn't survive. That's what a mess we're in.
So, yeah, well, we've got, I'm saying we as in the state of Illinois, not we in this room, have got, from your description, some pretty serious issues going on that just need, I mean, they need to be dealt with forthrightly now. And we got about, I think we got about 5 minutes left here. So why don't you just go over what you think is necessary to get Illinois out of its hole and back into balance?
I'm going to use one word, and that's growth. If this state does not wake up and find a way to grow this state's economy at no less than 3%, but optimally at 4%, we could fail.
That's a normal business rate, isn't it? In the
past,
the United States has grown 3-4% normally.
That's correct. In the past, it was. Illinois' growth rate today is far, far less than that.
Okay.
So if we can grow our way to a level where we can at least pay down the debt we have and provide core services such as education and take care of those that are the most needy, we won't need to do drastic things like closing Murray Center, where the population there are are men and women who are profoundly mentally ill, and now they're sort of out on their own. We won't be closing prisons. And that's a big deal in a sense, because we've had prisoners killed since the closing of TAMS and Dwight. We've had prisoners killed. We've had guards severely beaten to the point where they will not recover and live a normal life. So instead of doing things where we take away from public safety, we can do things that add to public safety.
Okay. You know, you just mentioned, and we're running out of time here, but I just want to say, you know, take care of the most needy. There's where it seems to me the problem comes in, is the definition of who the needy are and who are simply getting charity that could be fending for themselves.
That's a good point. We know, and we've been very dilatory in how we've handled this, but a year ago we passed a bill in the House, which later became law, that told the governor to go in and find an outside vendor to scrub the Medicaid rolls, because we knew that we had people on there that were not deserving. So far, out of the 310,000 people that need to be looked at, need to be assessed or reviewed, so far we've gone through and looked at, we've looked at 28,000, 13,000 of whom have been removed from the rolls.
So about half, a little more than half of the people that were just looked at.
Correct. But my point is, the percentage of the total of that 310,000 that need to be looked at is almost insignificant. We continue to pay bills to people that are undeserving, and in many cases are not even residents of the state of Illinois. So we have problems.
So it sounds like they've looked at less than 10% of the people who need to be, you know, who are on the system. And of this less than 10% already, you're saying that maybe 5% of the total didn't belong on there.
Roughly.
And so it could be that there might be, of the 310,000, you know, maybe 100,000 that you're paying for that shouldn't be, that money that could go to could pay vendors?
Exactly, and I'm not an expert in the area.
Even if it's 50,000 that don't belong there,
I agree.
You can use that money to pay vendors?
The people who are knowledgeable in this area of expense, state expense, tell me that there is more than 50% of the people on these rolls, because this goes back to the days when Governor Blagojevich and his team decided that they would bring it was the All Kids program, which also impacted the kids' families. When he brought those people into the system and we paid for it, and what we know is, and most of these people that are being scrubbed are just simply non-residents of the state of Illinois.
Well, I would like to go further with this. We will have you back another time, but you know, 30 minutes is 30 minutes. And we've covered a lot of territory here today, so definitely appreciate your coming back and spending some more time with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To the audience, I've been speaking with State Representative Dwight Kay. He represents the District 112, which I already gave you a list of. Please do tell your friends that if they'd like to hear this, they can go to YouTube and they will be seeing this particular interview. To the rest of you, we'll see you next time. Thank you.